Chapter 24.
Your Honor, I object. This is not a trial. And furthermore, counsel knows that opposing counsel has right to full disclosure to any and all testimony and or evidence relevant to this case. Have you given full disclosure to opposing counsel?
I have every intention of letting opposing counsel view this information, Your Honor.
Mr. Mikovich, is there anything you'd like to add on your client's behalf? Yes, Your Honor. I would like to make a plea that the prosecuting attorney's evidence is rendered irrelevant and therefore should be inadmissible to this case. Counselor, I will determine whether or not said evidence is rendered irrelevant after I've had the chance to review it. In the matter of Miss Berta's bail, I have decided to set bail at $250,000. Your Honor, I humbly request a hearing for a bail reduction, as that clearly violates my client's rights under the Eighth Amendment. Mr. Mikovich, I am very much aware of your client's rights. However, I am denying your request based on the particulars of this case. If Miss Berta is unprepared to make bail at this time, she will remain in custody under the strict protection of Sheriff Moran until a trial date has been set. Now, for the record, is your client prepared to make bail?
Nick pulled up into the driveway. It was a little after 10, and he was beat. Nick got out of the car and crossed the yard. All the lights were off. He figured Michelin was asleep. Having unlocked the door, he went inside. Had he not known that she was there, he would have thought that the house was completely empty. Not a single light was on. Nick opened the bedroom door and turned on the light. There she lay, sleeping soundly, with a flashlight held firmly in her grasp. Nick wasn't sure what was going on, but whatever it was had her looking pale with fear even in her sleep. He crossed the room and eased down on the bed beside her. Her eyes opened as she jumped. "You're back." She drew in a sigh of relief.
Did you miss me?
You have no idea how much.
Was with a flashlight.
Oh, I thought I heard someone outside.
When?
About an hour ago.
Why didn't you call me?
Because I can't call you for every little sound I hear. I'm fine, really. I'm sure it's nothing.
What were you planning to do? Whack whoever it was over the head with this?
He asked, holding up the flashlight. Unless you have a better suggestion. Nick went over to the window. He pulled the blinds discreetly apart and looked out. He couldn't see anything. I'm sure I was just being paranoid, she said, coming over to him.
You'd feel safer if you went back to Virginia.
Are you trying to get rid of me, Nick Moran?
You know I'm not. But you said yourself that some maniac's out there running loose. That's enough to make anybody a little paranoid.
Even you?
I'll admit, I'll sleep a lot better when this is over. I'll know that the people that I love will be safe.
Do you really want me to leave? I thought you needed me.
I do need you, but I don't know what I would do if you got hurt.
I'm okay. By the way, I spoke to someone in D.C. who I think can help us.
Who is it?
His name is Andrew Tomerick. He gathers intelligence at the department. He's also a good friend of my dad's. I've known Andy for a long time. I trust him. Anyway, this evening he called just out of the blue. He said he heard about my suspension and he wanted to know if he could help. I told him how Brett hung me out to dry with Will, and that's when he told me that Brett knew about Charlene Berta long before this case was ever opened.
If that's true, there's your personal connection, which means Brett could have very well altered her file.
It's possible, but there's something else. Andy told me that Brett was under investigation for forging government checks.
What else did he say?
Nick managed, remembering what Vincent had said about Brett's pending investigation. He said that there are some documents that I should see, so he emailed them to me. The only problem is my laptop was in my motel room.
Can you access your account now?
All I need is a computer.
We'll use Chase's.
Nick said as he and Michelin went down the hallway to Chase's room. Once there, he flipped the switch and turned it on. Michelin pulled the chair away from the desk and sat down. She began typing in the login information to her email account. Once in, she scanned the list of incoming mail. Sure enough, there was a message from A. Tomerick. She clicked on the message and waited. Nick moved in for a closer look. After downloading the link, Michelin opened copies of the U.S. government-issued checks, all made payable to women for significant amounts, signed by Brett Auger. One of the names on the check was for Norma Billings.
Will you look at that?
Nick said, staring at the name on the screen.
That's the name Charlene was using in Florida.
How much do you want to bet that Becky Stratton and Ruby Bittner are aliases of Charlene Berta?
I wouldn't be surprised if they were.
She's clever, I'll give her that. Michelin said with her eyes still glued to the screen. Look at the different way she signed her name each time.
Are you really convinced that's all, Charlene?
At this point, I wouldn't put anything past her.
All right. I'll send this to Frank Sharp in Lee County. Frank's a graphologist with the sheriff's department. He'll be able to tell if the writing was done by the same person.
I don't know if that's a good idea. Do we really want an outsider looking at this information and asking questions? I mean, Andy trusted me with this. It's confidential.
I understand that, but what choice do we have?
We could go to the source.
You mean Charlene?
Exactly. We'll tell her that we can cut her a deal if she tells us everything she knows about Brett's involvement as well as who those names are.
With the right pressure, she might talk. I don't know. Her arraignment is set for tomorrow morning.
Are you afraid she might try to run?
I really can't see her hanging around like a good little counterfeiter. Can you?
So, what do we do?
There's really nothing we can do about it tonight.
In that case, I'm going to turn in. Are you coming? She asked, pausing to hear his answer.
No, I've got some work to do first. I'll be in as soon as I'm finished.
Don't stay up too late. Michelin said as she left. Nick's work had nothing to do with the case. It was personal, his kids. Not wanting to bring up the subject again, Nick chose to let it go. The thought of discussing their safety any more tonight, as he and Michelin had been doing throughout the earlier part of the evening, was only making him miss them more. Since his talk with Ripa, Nick wondered if he had done the right thing sending Chase and Allie away. If Ripa Carey was looking for Chase, there was no telling who else might be looking for him as well. Beth Larson's fear that Jacob's life was in jeopardy gave Nick chills. Sending Chase and Allie away was the only option to keep his kids safe. From out of nowhere, Susan popped into his head. Since Michelin had come into his life on a personal level, Nick hadn't found himself thinking about Susan as much as he had done before. He felt a little guilty about that. Yet he couldn't help but wonder if Susan would have taken the kids had she had known it would have come to this. Aggravation began to burn within Nick's chest as he thought about how his work had managed to rip his family apart. He scolded himself for not thinking that something like this would have happened sooner or later. After all, it had been nothing but 10 years of nothing but traffic violations, petty thefts here and there, and some boring court appearances. He should have known that it couldn't have lasted much longer, for when the brunt of the work finally fell on his shoulders, it came down hard without warning. Monday morning, Nick pulled over a lead-foot driver and settled a domestic dispute on his way to work. With a start like this, he wasn't looking forward to what the rest of the day had in store. To top it off, he had to confront Charlene about her involvement with Brett before she was due in court. If Stan Mikovich had his way, Charlene Berta would be walking out of the courthouse faster than Judge Schrader could strike the gavel. Nick couldn't help but wonder if Stan really believed that his client was innocent. Or was he simply choosing to ignore the evidence regarding Brett Auger and the forged government checks? Nick pulled into a space in front of the station. Already it was going on 9:30, and Charlene was due in court at 10. Nick ran up to the station doors and pulled it open. "You just missed him," Myra said in place of her usual good morning.
"Missed who?"
Nick asked, catching his breath. "Deputy Fisk just escorted Charlene Berta to the courthouse. They left about 6 minutes ago."
"On whose orders?"
"Judge Schrader. Something about a family emergency." Nick heard as he headed back out to his car.
"That's just great,"
he said under his breath. One thing was certain. Stan would do everything in his power to keep him from talking to Charlene, let alone interrogate her. Having arrived at the courthouse, Nick made his way up the stairs and down the hall to the main courtroom. He adjusted his necktie and pushed the double doors open. There he found Fisk pacing the floor nervously while the other citizens took their seats.
"Deputy Fisk, where is she?"
Nick asked.
"Oh, Charlene."
The words tumbled out of Fisk's mouth as he turned and pointed to the table on the far side of the courtroom where Charlene sat, talking with Stan. There was no chance he would be able to ask her anything. It was done. Nick sighed heavily.
"Did I do something wrong?"
Fisk asked.
"No, you did fine."
Nick said, patting the young deputy on his shoulder.
"Why don't you go do some patrolling? I've got it from here." "Yes, sir."
Fisk said, leaving without looking back. Now, all Nick had to do was find a way to question Charlene without Stan being present. That, he knew, would be pretty close to impossible. After giving the matter some thought, an idea came to his mind. Nick stepped out into the lobby. He pulled out his cell phone and dialed the number to his party. "Hello?" Michelin answered on the third ring.
Hey, it's me. Are you busy at the moment?
"I'm just heading into the station."
Do you think you can come to the courthouse instead?
"I'll be there in 2 minutes."
Thanks. Bye now.
Nick said, hanging up as he went back into the courtroom.
All rise.
The bailiff called out as everyone stood. Nick looked over at Charlene. Just as he expected, she refused to look his way. Judge Strader, clad in his black judicial robe, came out of the side door and took his place on the bench. Everyone sat attentively as they listened to him go through the particulars of the case, identifying the charges that were brought against the defendant. Joni Asler, Callahan's prosecuting attorney, made a motion that Judge Strader deny bail for Charlene Berta until the trial. Then she began listing reasons to support her motion. The bored expression on the judge's face revealed that he would have preferred being anywhere other than court. When Joni finished her last point, she lowered herself into the chair. Judge Strader looked over at Stan.
Counsel for the defense, how does your client plead?
Stan stood up.
Not guilty, Your Honor. Miss Berta is neither a threat to the community nor is she a flight risk. Therefore, I make a motion that she be released on her own recognizance until trial.
Your Honor, I object. Joni interrupted. Stan shot his attention over to her. I feel that Miss Berta will skip bail if given the opportunity to avoid a similar fate as her associates who are now in custody.
Your Honor, my client's family is prepared to set up a substantial amount of money for bail to keep her in Callahan.
Is that money counterfeit? Joni asked with a knowing smirk.
Counsel, I will not have such remarks in my courtroom. Is that understood?
Judge Strader warned. Yes, Your Honor. Joni managed an apologetic smile.
Have counsel's last remarks stricken from the record?
Judge Strader told the court reporter. The sound of the door opening captured Nick's attention. He turned around as Michelin made her way down the aisle and took a seat behind the table where Joni was sitting. Nick walked over to Joni and discreetly whispered something in her ear. She nodded. Then he sat down beside Michelin. Your Honor, Joni said, rising from her chair.
Yes, Counselor.
I request a 10-minute recess.
Plan to have this arraignment wrapped up by then. Is it really necessary?
Yes, Your Honor.
This court will take a 10-minute recess.
Judge Strader said, striking the gavel. Indistinct voices could be heard among the people in the courtroom. Nick, Joni said while straightening the papers on the table in front of her. He walked over, followed by Michelin.
Joni,
Nick said, making the introductions between both the women. Throughout the remainder of the recess, Michelin filled Joni in on the highlights of the evidence she had against the defendant, while Joni jotted down what was being said.
Counselors, please approach the bench.
Judge Strader said, having reconvened. Both Stan and Joni took their places before the judge. From where Nick sat, he couldn't hear what was being said, just the exchange of muffled voices back and forth. Then the two returned to their seats.
Mr. Mikovich, you said that your client pleads not guilty. That is correct, Your Honor. Let the record show that defense counsel has entered a plea of not guilty. Counsel, what say you?
Judge Strader asked, looking at Joni. Your Honor, if it pleases the court, I have information that is relevant to the defendant's character and should be used as a determining factor in your decision to grant bail.
What information do you have?
I have the testimony of Agent Michelin Stone of the Special Investigations Division of the United States Treasury Department. Joni said, looking over toward Michelin.
Your Honor, I object. This is not a trial. And furthermore, counsel knows that opposing counsel has right to full disclosure to any and all testimony and or evidence relevant to this case. Have you given full disclosure to opposing counsel?
I have every intention of letting opposing counsel view this information, Your Honor.
Mr. Mikovich, is there anything you'd like to add on your client's behalf? Yes, Your Honor. I would like to make a plea that the prosecuting attorney's evidence is rendered irrelevant and therefore should be inadmissible to this case. Counselor, I will determine whether or not said evidence is rendered irrelevant after I've had the chance to review it. In the matter of Miss Berta's bail, I have decided to set bail at $250,000. Your Honor, I humbly request a hearing for a bail reduction, as that clearly violates my client's rights under the Eighth Amendment. Mr. Mikovich, I am very much aware of your client's rights. However, I am denying your request based on the particulars of this case. If Miss Berta is unprepared to make bail at this time, she will remain in custody under the strict protection of Sheriff Moran until a trial date has been set. Now, for the record, is your client prepared to make bail? Not at this time, Your Honor. In that case, Sheriff Moran, you may escort the defendant back to her cell. This court is adjourned.
Judge Strader said, striking the gavel. Even from where he was sitting, Nick could see a little smile of relief come over Charlene's face. However, he wondered if she would feel that way after his line of questioning regarding Brett Auger.
So, how about we set a meeting for sometime this week to review the case?
Nick heard Joni ask Michelin as he approached the table.
Tomorrow's fine for me. Does it work for you?
Joni asked Nick.
We can meet at the station, say around 3.
Sounds good. I'll see you both then.
Joni said. After telling Michelin goodbye, Nick walked over to Charlene.
This is going to butcher your defense.
Stan said, shoving his papers into his briefcase. Stan looked at Nick and then back at Charlene.
I'll see you sometime next week, possibly Wednesday or Thursday at the latest.
Thank you, Swaney.
Charlene said quietly. Stan grabbed up his briefcase from the table and left. Seeing Charlene now, Nick couldn't help but feel sorry for her, even after the new information had come to light. What was it about this woman that made him feel such pity? Trying to put his feelings for her aside, Nick encouraged Charlene to stand up while he secured the cuffs around her wrist.
All right, let's go.
You sound disappointed,
Charlene said, mistaking the subdued sound of his voice.
Actually, Charlene, I couldn't be happier.
Nick said, leading her out to his patrol car. The drive back was quiet, giving Nick the time he needed to silently go over the questions pertaining to Charlene's involvement with Brett and the forged government checks. While sitting at the stoplight waiting for oncoming traffic to clear, Nick heard static from his radio along with the garbled sound of dispatch. Nick pressed the button.
Sheriff Moran, over.
This emergency dispatch. I've got reports of gunshot fired at 2417 Derby. Do you copy?
I'm detained at the moment. Have you tried my deputy? Over.
He's responding to another call. Over.
Copy that.
Nick said, flipping the siren, bringing traffic to a screeching halt as he went sailing full speed through the intersection.
Whoa, Sheriff, what's going on?
Charlene yelled, grabbing hold of the door.
Just sit tight. I've got another call.
Nick swerved around cars whose drivers either didn't hear him coming or were just too stubborn to obey the law and move out of his way. Not that he had the time to make a case out of it. He was too busy fuming on account that his department was understaffed. Callahan was obviously changing. Population was rising, and crime was increasing. Whether Nick could keep up or not.